Hey everybody, Pastor Ryan here with you today with a special message geared towards the children in the congregation, but no doubt one by theme and by story, a great message for you as parents to share in your homes, or if you're viewing this on your own, maybe a story or some time in prayer together to share with someone you love. I have with me today a set of bookends. It looks like praying hands when they're put together, but when they're separated, two hands that hold up little books. They're often on the shelf behind me for some of our other lessons and productions. They tend to hold together my little prayer books, no doubt because that's what the hands would be doing otherwise in prayer. In fact, I'll set them here off to the side with some of my smaller books so that you can see them in action. When it comes to the stories that we share in God's Word, there are times where Jesus has an amazing teaching that we'll often call a bookend. That is to say, just like there's two bookends on one side or the other of a book, sometimes Jesus will do things that echo or are a repeat of something that he's done before. When something is repeated, odds are you're going to pay more attention to it. I'm going to share a story with you today from John's Gospel that is one of these bookends, something that Jesus repeats in his teaching, all for the benefit of his students that we know to be the disciples. And so it is again, after Jesus has raised from the dead, he shares some special time with his disciples. Grab my Bible here and we're going to go to John chapter 21 and see what Jesus is teaching. This story is called Jesus and the Miraculous Catch of Fish. Now Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Another name for that sea you might know from Sunday school is the Sea of Galilee. It happened in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, that would be James and John, and the two other disciples came together. Simon Peter looked to the other disciples and said, "I'm going to go fishing." And so they said to him, "Peter, we will go with you." So they went out and they got into their boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early on in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. So he called out to them, saying, "Dear friends, haven't you caught any fish?" And they yelled back to him, saying, "No, we've caught nothing." And so Jesus said, "Throw your net onto the right side of the boat, and you will find some fish." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because there was such a large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "Wow, it's the Lord." And as soon as Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him because he had taken it off for work, and he jumped immediately into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish because they were not far from the shore, only about 100 yards off. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, and there was some fish on it and some bread to the side. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you just caught." Peter climbed aboard and he dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have some breakfast." Now, I don't know when you're watching this. I don't know if it's breakfast time or just after breakfast. I don't know if you're even like Jesus and the disciples and you have grilled fish for breakfast. It's just not something that we're used to. But when you hear what Jesus says and you watch what Jesus is doing, there's a unique bookend to what Jesus has to say. If the story of Jesus saying, "Throw the nets on the other side and you'll catch more fish," sounds familiar, it's because that was the same way that Jesus chose to call the first disciples. In that day, it's kind of interesting. You see all of these great fishermen catching nothing, and Jesus, who happens to be the son of a carpenter, goes out to the pier and thinks he knows something about fishing. Well, the disciples learned that day that when they listened to Jesus, very powerful and miraculous things happen. Just the same, even though they didn't know it was Jesus in the story that we just read, as soon as they heard his voice and his direction, at least John knew that it was Jesus. They listened, and it happened just as Jesus made it happen before. When you have a bookend like that, when you have Jesus repeating something amazing, you take your eyes off of one book of the Bible and you look at the whole Bible together. And so it is, I could say it this way to you. Just like we have the bookend of two stories of Jesus and the miraculous catch of fish, in John's Gospel we also celebrate him as the light of the world. Now, if you've been to Sunday school and you know the story of creation, you know that everything we see as light was called into existence by God speaking. Let there be light, and there was light. As a little bit of a flicker of light in the darkness, one of my teachers shared with me that when you get to see Jesus teaching the disciples, you get to see a little flicker of light. Not only because Jesus is the light of the world, but because Jesus is very literally taking a flint and stone and making sparks to start a fire to cook some breakfast. I think it's rather special to see what Jesus does, because as he does these things in repeated fashion, even as he's getting ready to leave his disciples, there's that moment where Jesus doesn't have to teach any big words or any big truths. Jesus doesn't have to make his disciples do anything more. He simply wants to spend those last moments to take the time and enjoy the company of his friends and show a little hospitality by feeding them. I pray for you today that your life is as simple and wonderful as sitting down with your family and being able to enjoy a little bit of breakfast. I pray for you that as the seasons change and as we enter into the summertime, that you don't think so much about all that it is that you need to know, but knowing that Jesus is there for you, that he'll continue to teach you and show you his love, and that he'll continue to repeat those things to you so that you focus on him and pay attention to his voice. May God continue to bless you in your homes. Have fun as the summer begins, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. God's peace.